Good morning. This is Dylan Jovine with Behind the Markets. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, August 29th. TGIF. This is the last Friday in August. I am happy to say I'm looking forward to the weekend, even though when you own your own business, it's really not a weekend. It's not the way it works. Just the market's not open on the weekend. You're basically working 7 days a week all the time. But I'm happy to say I went to meet my daughter's teachers, her high school teachers, and I love the history teacher. Very important to me, American history. You guys know I'm a history nut. For sure, very important. And this person seems to really understand the importance of American history, which is something that I think needs to be really drilled down to our kids, because I see a lot of kind of nihilistic thinking from the young today that looks at us as a terrible country, a slave-holding country. We didn't do anything right. We're awful. We're just terrible people. We should be apologizing in perpetuity because of how bad we are as a country. And I just think to myself, my goodness, we need to really get down and teach these kids why this is the greatest country on earth. And my daughter's history teacher seems to really understand that. Anyway, today I wanted to talk about actually something that has to do with American history, the independence of the Federal Reserve Board. A lot of my friends are asking about what's going on here. Why is President Trump pushing to fire now Lisa Cook, a Biden appointee to the Federal Reserve? It's a tricky situation, okay? He has accused her of really mortgage fraud, of declaring two residences, primary residences, so that she basically gets lower interest rates, basically. So what he is alleging is that Lisa Cook has a primary residence. She bought a second home and also said that was also her primary residence to get lower rates. And there's a lot of very problematic accusation in the first place. First of all, apparently it was the person who runs the Fed mortgage program that actually accused her of this on a tweet. And you're saying to yourself, do you have people running the mortgage department or the IRS that are looking at political enemies of the president and looking through our private files to make these kinds of cases? That's very disturbing to me. I'm not comfortable with that at all. And look, if it's true that the president can remove somebody from the Fed without any facts, then the Fed is no longer independent, period. That is very troubling to me because, look, you're either playing chess or you're playing checkers. If you're playing checkers, yeah, let's get rid of this Biden appointee from the Fed. Great, that's terrific. Trump gets to control the Fed, and that's fabulous, right? If you think so. I don't. If you're playing chess, you say to yourself, gosh, if Trump could do this now, what happens the next time a Democratic president takes over? What could that person do to the Federal Reserve? And maybe President Trump could steer Fed, maybe, I doubt it, but maybe the president knows business so well he could steer Federal Reserve policy better than the Federal Reserve. Maybe. Let's just say that's even possible. Let's even say that's possible. Do you think the next person will have the same soft touch? Or the person after that? Or the person after that? At the end of the day, I'm a big believer in the independence of the Federal Reserve because basically if you have, history has shown over and over again in different countries around the world, that if a Federal Reserve is independent, you get lower interest rates, lower inflation. If a Federal Reserve is not independent, what happens is they follow political objectives, especially in a two-party system like ours. We're going to get a Democrat in office who's going to say, I want housing for everybody. I want to print money to give everybody universal basic income of $5,000 or $10,000 a month. This is bonkers where you could take this if you're playing chess. If you're playing checkers, sure, Trump, run the Federal Reserve. But if you're playing chess, you say, good Lord, do you really want the Dems to have this power or other Republicans to have this power? You don't. So look, at the end of the day, what is happening? Investors are now starting to bet that a Fed that's not independent is going to be less focused on inflation. They're going to print money like bonkers, okay? Which makes the ownership of long-term bonds less favorable. Long-term bonds sell off interest rates, the yields on those bonds go up. That means when you have a Fed that is not independent, you are going to pay higher mortgage rates, higher car loan rates, higher credit card rates. This is not my opinion. It's not an opinion. This is fact. This is fact. When you look at the history of England, when you look at France, when you look at Germany, when you look at Turkey, when you look at even our own country. As a matter of fact, the last president that influenced the Fed, as we've talked about here in these videos, was Richard Nixon, who's strangely one of my favorite presidents. I have a soft spot for Nixon, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, Nomura Securities, which is a big Japanese trading firm, the Goldman Sachs of Japan, their currency strategist, Craig Chan, did a little report showing how, if Trump keeps chipping away at the Fed's independence, what was the last time a president influenced Fed independence that much? And it was Nixon. And he said, what happened when Nixon was able to bend Arthur Burns, really, and in some ways take partial control of Fed policy? And here we have it. Stocks dropped 19%. 10-year Treasury yields surged 130 basis points to 7.58%, which is more than 3 full percentage points above today's levels. Chan and his team, informed by the Nixon peril, sees risks to a weaker U.S. dollar, of course. If the market fears a loss to Fed independence, of course, the U.S. dollar would sell off, which is one of the reasons it has been selling off this year. And it's funny, you could almost set your watch to it. Pretty much every time the president just rails against Fed independence, yields on long-term treasuries start to rise and the dollar starts to sell off. It's real banana republic type stuff here. It's just crazy. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you right now, we've become the richest country on the planet by far, in part because of Fed independence. Make no mistake about it. And frankly, I know a lot of folks out there complain, especially politicians, oh, the Fed's gotten too big. The Fed's gotten too powerful. Yeah, okay. Listen, it's because the politicians are not balancing budgets, okay? It's because they are pushing their responsibility secretly to the Fed, and now they're blaming the Fed. It is just unbelievable how either people who say that in political circles in Washington, people who blame the Fed, elected officials who blame the Fed and say it's become too powerful are either stupid, they haven't put two and two together, or they're lying. Now, I know that doesn't surprise anybody listening to when we're talking about Washington politicians here, but that is the truth. It is their inability to balance budgets and do their job that has pushed this need to finance these massive deficits onto the Fed in the first place. So at least know that ain't fake news. I'm telling you what it is, okay? You're hearing a lot of fake news out there from people who don't know anything about the business of finance. And that's what they're telling you. So keep an open mind, keep aware, and pray to goodness that we keep Fed independence or accept higher mortgage rates. Anyway, that's all I have. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll speak to you Monday.